So my name is Kevin Ryan. I am a Marine Corps veteran, a Chicago public school teacher, and former candidate for the U.S. Senate in the Democratic primary here in Illinois. I ran for office because I believe in public service, and I think that at the point that our democracy is in right now, that serving in politics is ground zero. It's the most important place for public servants to be. And so that's why I packed up my careers in the military and in Washington, D.C. to come on home and get into the trenches of Illinois politics to try and reform our democracy from the inside.
Perfect. So if you had to identify one major issue in local or national politics, what would be that kind of one root cause of a lot of the issues we're seeing today?
Well, there's one root cause of all of our ills in society, and that is the role of money in politics. Our elections do not choose the best candidates, the most qualified candidates, those with the best ideas. Our elections go to the highest bidders. Now, it's true that money doesn't guarantee success. Just look at my Senate race. Raja Krishnamurthy outspent Juliana Stratton, and Juliana Stratton won. But they both had tens of millions of dollars spent. So you need that kind of money to even be competitive, which means grassroots working class candidates like myself don't get a level playing field. And because of that, the impetus or the power of our democracy shifts to donors as opposed to ordinary voters.
When I was engaging with your election, I went to both debates at UChicago, and that's how I first met you and found out about your campaign and really engaged with that race. And what I noticed is how you were affected by being put into the second debate. So that's an obvious way of silencing maybe more progressive voices that don't have the same financial backing. What are some other ways?
When it comes to money in politics, I think the biggest thing I learned in this campaign is that there's no boogeyman. There's no one person behind the curtain in the shadows that we can point to and say that you're the problem, because we're all complicit in it. The University of Chicago is a great example. They only invited the top 3 fundraisers to their debate. Everyone else got put at the kids' table. So we're all complicit because the University of Chicago will only invite those top 3 candidates and expect the other candidates just to be silent, which majority of them were. But I wasn't, because I was running a serious campaign. And that's why, if you remember at the debate, I pointed out, I find it shocking that we are put in a separate debate. Why don't we have all the candidates speaking at the same time? This debate is a great example. We have room for 9 candidates, Democrats and Republicans, but we didn't have room for the 10 Democratic nominees in the debate covered by WBEZ. There is an arbitrary selection process here being decided by money. Under that criteria, if I was polling in first place at 60%, but had $1 less than the top 3 fundraiser, I wouldn't be invited. No candidate would be invited if they were not in the top 3 fundraisers. It's an arbitrary metric used to separate us. There are candidates here that should have been on that stage. And I am running unapologetically against money in politics to set the example, because I believe that is what our democracy needs. Thank you. And so if you're not raising those large sums of money, people don't take you seriously. And that's, I think, the worst impact of money in politics.
Online, I think a lot of the discourse surrounds Israel and Israeli money in our local elections and national elections as well. But that they've kind of been framed as a bit of a boogeyman, as the single donor. What are some other lobbies and groups who you find intervened in your race, other races, and have maybe similar levels of impact or the same kind of nefarious outcomes?
Right, so you're referring to AIPAC, the American
AIPAC.
Israel Public Affairs Committee. It's undeniable that AIPAC, just as a PAC, or super PAC, has an outsized role in every single election in the United States. So if we want to take into account people in the United States who are eligible for Israeli citizenship under Israeli standards, that's about 5% of the population. And so this organization ostensibly represents, that percent of the populace that would be eligible for Israeli citizenship or abide by the Jewish identity and believe in the state of Israel and want to be a part of the state of Israel. Yet AIPAC is the 99.9 percentile of donors to all races. So it is one of the largest donors in the United States. So if an organization that's supposed to represent 5% of the population has that kind of sway, it's outsized, right? And money gives them that outsized role. That goes the same for big oil, the tobacco industry, and now what we're seeing, AI and video gaming or online gambling, crypto as well, right? So these new burgeoning technologies that are becoming more prevalent, they are using their money to protect their profits so that they can make more money at the expense of society.
How do you think that you or another candidate like you, how are you able to overcome these issues of big finance and PACs in politics? Have you seen any convincing ways to kind of get past that as a smaller candidate?
Well, I think one thing that there's a few candidates that are doing now is reimagining how to raise money, because money in politics is a problem, but where the money comes from is important, and what the size of those donations are. So my litmus test is looking at a candidate, seeing where the majority of their money comes from. There's itemized donations and there's unitemized. Itemized means it's over $200, unitemized it's less than $200. So we want to look at candidates where the majority of their money, not the number of donations, but the majority of their money is coming from those small dollar unitemized donations, as opposed to candidates where the majority of it comes from big donors over $200. The majority of candidates in office their money comes from a lot of large donors, like 2,000 donors that will give them max donations, and that's how they build these war chests, keep themselves in power. So one way for younger candidates, working class candidates to break through is to leverage new technologies to try and expand the fundraising apparatus of those small dollar donations. For young people who want to run for office, who want to break the mold, I think we have to start there to look at how to raise the money you need to combat the big money that's in politics. And then once you get into office, the critical step is, if you get in that using that method, is to do the hard work to get a constitutional amendment passed that will remove the role of money in politics. The true challenge in social media is transitioning the online presence to real world action, which I think I was able to get fairly good at on the campaign, of getting people out, getting them to donate money, getting them to activate, which I'm excited to use in my new role with Veterans for All Voters. We're going to be continuing that work to advocate for structural reforms here in Illinois. But I also think, to your point, it's important to see younger candidates, because it's not even it's not just the mode of communication, like via social media. It's also what they're saying, and just being a little bit more in touch with the younger generation. The average age of the United States Senate is 65, right? There's an incredibly large age gap between 18-year-olds who are voting and the United States Senate.
About 35 or 30 years over the average age in the U.S. too. I think it's 35, 40.
Right. I mean, we make our generals retire at the age of 64. So it's interesting that the ones who write the rules can continue on to, like, our the president of the pro tempore of the Senate is 91, I think, Senator Chuck Grassley. But I do think it's important not to be ageist, and it's more about capability than it is about an age. That being said, we do have many professions where we have a restriction of mandatory retirement. But all that to say is the Congress has gotten older, and so it's harder for young people to connect with it.
Perfect. So do you support age limits?
I do support age limits. I think I think like 75 would be a good age limit. That would pair with many states that have age limits for their judicial branches. I think somewhere in the 30s, like 35 states have age limits between 70 and 80 for their judges. And it makes sense. I mean, also just in like a humanist perspective, go retire. Yeah. You don't need to be doing all this hard work. Same thing, like our generals have to retire at 64, pilot or air traffic controllers, I think, have to retire at 55. And so I do support age limits. And again, I understand that it's not about being ageist, but the Constitution already is ageist, right? Because you have to be 30 years old to be a senator. So if we're saying it's okay for there to be an age minimum, well, that opens the door. Say if there's an age minimum, well, then why can there not be an age maximum?
I think a lot of this question of big money right now kind of revolves around the Iran war with Israel, oil lobbyists. How do you think that Trump's financial donors and his financial donor pool affects his actions, like the invasion of Iran?
I mean, I think if there's one silver lining from the Trump administration, it's that they are doing all of the things out loud. They're not even trying to hide the corruption. And I think that the silver lining can be our wake up moment collectively as a society to say, okay, this is out of control. If we look at the progressive era, right, the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, the progressive era came on the heels of the Gilded Age, right? That's when we had this proliferation of wealth, solidified in the hands of very few, the robber barons up at top with the railroads and oil. And, at the University of Chicago, do you know what the name of the chapel is?
No, I don't.
Rockefeller Chapel, right?
Makes sense.
Do you know why? Because Rockefeller gave them money to build the chapel, right? So he was one, that was back in the Gilded Age. And so the progressive era, the reform era came on the heels of that because it got so out of control that society corrected itself. So I think that, of course, the Trump administration is making decisions that is going to enrich the donors, because that's why donors make these contributions. It's important to they're not donations, they are investments. And people don't make investments without expecting returns. And so they make these investments expecting the returns, and quite frankly, they're getting really good returns right now.
Yeah. So who are some of the figures now who you think can rise to that occasion and become those new progressive figures? Is there anyone you look at as viable to do so?
That's a great question. I'll start with at the low level. I think there's a lot of names out there right now that we don't know that will become household names. And I saw it across the state as I was canvassing and meeting. There's a lot of young people who are energized and ready to meet this moment. I think we're going to see a new generation start to crop up at the local level and work their way up. I will say I think AOC is really in the right place with everything that she's doing and how she got to office. She spent, I think, $83,000 to unseat a member of the Democratic Party leadership. I mean, this guy was slated to be the next Speaker of the House. And she did that by knocking on doors and putting in the sweat equity, was spending $83,000. That's absolutely nothing. And it was all small dollar donations. So she proves how you can effectively organize and get into office without bowing to the donors.
What specific policies do you support to tackle the issues around campaign finance?
The most critical one, which I campaigned on, is we need an amendment to the Constitution to overrule Citizens United and Buckley versus Valeo. A lot of people don't talk about Buckley versus Valeo, they only talk about Citizens United, but remember, Citizens United only protects super PACs. It doesn't, it's important to remember that corporations are not people, right? They are not. They're not the ones who actually make the donations. People still do it, right?
Yeah.
And so we still have these ultra wealthy people, and they can still donate to campaigns as individuals, and they can form their own PACs and pour their own money into it. So Congress needs to set spending limits. We used to have spending limits in 1974. Congress passed the Federal Election Campaign Act that had spending limits, and the Supreme Court in Buckley versus Valeo said that's unconstitutional. So that's why we need an amendment that authorizes Congress to establish spending limits and ban super PACs from participating. But at our state level, there's something that we can do outside of a constitutional amendment. The Illinois General Assembly and our governor could make it happen right now during this session, and that's publicly financed campaigns. If we had publicly financed campaigns, grassroots working class candidates would have a chance to compete against moneyed candidates. because they'd have to reach a threshold of fundraising to show a modicum of public support, and then they would get access to public funds to run their campaign. That gives them an equal shot on a level playing field.
With you endorsing those specific policies, what do you think is the best way for people, for citizens, to back those policies, other than, of course, voting for politicians who believe in them? How can other people, just normal people, affect these issues?
Well, do you remember when I said that there's no boogeyman and we're all complacent? We are. And so one thing we could do is internally within ourselves is evaluate candidates not based on how much money they've raised, but by what they're saying, what they've done, and what they want to do. Because I know that I've even done it myself. Even during the campaign, like looking at other candidates, I'll look at how much money they raised, like, oh, this person's not serious. I'm like, no, don't say that. Don't make money the central issue. Yeah. Actually do your research, because if we talk about money in politics, what does the money do? Do you know why money is so important?
They give themselves a platform to amplify only their voice, and then if it's the only voice someone's heard, if it's the only name someone recognizes, that's who they're going to vote for.
The only name someone recognizes, right? That's it. Money, what it comes down to, money in politics buys name recognition.
Exactly, yeah.
And the reason that works is on us as voters. There's a lot of people who I met on the campaign trail who said, oh, I've never heard of you. Did you try?
Yeah.
Because all you would have to do is look up who's running in the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate, and you could look at the websites and like do the research and find who these people are, and then you would see what they're all about. But we as voters have become almost complacent and lazy to say like, well, they got to come to me. But then at the same time, we all hate the role of money in politics, but we don't want to do the research ourselves. And I understand that, especially with working class people, it's a lot of work. Like, who's got the time to like go through all of this? But voting is a responsibility, right? And we do, as voters, have to take some of that onus and to look into candidates and not expect them to come to us. Because if that's what we expect, we're always going to get these moneyed candidates who are buying name recognition through mailers, TV ads, radio ads, as opposed to more grassroots candidates who are focusing more on the issues. So really, to answer your question, what can voters do? It's do your homework, research the candidates, and look at who's running as opposed to waiting for them to come to you. Because if you're waiting for them to come to you, you're just waiting for the moneyed candidate.
That's true. So I find it funny you're a teacher telling me to do homework as well.
I didn't give that much homework when I was a teacher. But yes, you do your homework.
So, do you think that civic education is then history, civics? I mean, I take global politics in school even. Do you think education like that is a way to solve that? Is a way to mobilize voters to educate themselves at a younger age? Is giving them a better understanding of our platforms? Like, how do you think we can improve our civic education to do so?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a practical aspect that we can implement, especially for like juniors and seniors in high school, that would differ by state. But to show them, here's how you find out who's running in the precinct that you live in, all of the people that you can vote for in this precinct. And here's how you find them. And here's the difference between the Chicago Board of Elections and the Illinois Board of Elections, right? And how to go through the candidates and how you can print a sample ballot beforehand and see all of the candidates you are. And you can look them up and you can make notes and you can bring that sample ballot in when you go to vote. It's like these practical exercises of how to vote. Because we always say, like, make sure you register to vote, make sure you go to vote. But if you're going into the voting booth and you haven't done homework, if you haven't studied for this test you're about to take, this exam where you're going to choose your preferences, you'll be wholly unprepared.